connecting. It's funny.
And will you get questions from your people watching?
Good question. Not a lot of people going to submit questions live, but I'm going to monitor the channel just in case. So yeah. All right. Looks like we are live, and I'll be sure to tune in and check in on the comment section as well after the recording. I know not everybody is able to watch this live. Well, hi, everybody. This is Fei Wu from Feisworld Media. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. This is a podcast and video format. And I'm just so pleased to be here with my new guest, Jeffrey Madoff, and who has published a new book. It's on my iPad right now, and I absolutely love it. The title is Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. Welcome, Jeffrey. I'm so glad that you're here.
Me too. Thank you for having me on.
So
where
Jeffrey,
is here? Where is here, by the way?
Where is here? We are here on, I think, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, which is Periscope. That's it. I'm still applying for LinkedIn. I hope they will approve me very soon. So live on many places. And where are you based, Jeffrey?
I'm in New York City.
Yeah.
And right now I'm in my apartment on the Upper West Side of New York, across from the Museum of Natural History.
Lovely. I love that spot. I feel like whenever I go to New York, that's kind of my dedicated spot for many, many years. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to travel there, even though with all the scheduled trips earlier this year, they were all canceled, as you can imagine. But I'm here still in Boston, Massachusetts, Newton to be specific, for people who live in Massachusetts. But, Jeffrey, I'm excited to talk to you because I think about the course of your career. It's just so not only creative, but it's so dynamic that, you were first a fashion designer in your very early 20s. In 1972, you were named one of the 10 top designers in the US. And then you had a complete career change at that time. When your career as a fashion designer was at its peak. Could you give us like a bit of that origin story to my audience? Like, what was happening there? How did you become a fashion designer?
By accident. I was working in a small boutique in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I went to college, University of Wisconsin. I had a double major in philosophy and psychology. Tried to get a job as a sage, but the wisdom factories weren't hiring at that point. And I had been on the wrestling team. So that was a great combination for any business to move forward. And I got a call from a dear friend of mine. We grew up together. His mother and my mother grew up together. And so my friend, Kenny Meerman, said he had graduated a year before me. And he said that he had saved up some money. Could I think of something that would earn more than bank interest? And I said, I see what we sell here. And I could always draw. So I said, I'll start a clothing company. And he said, okay. And the next week I had more money than I had ever had, which was $1,500, and sketched some shirts, found some fabrics that I liked. By the way, I was totally ignorant. I knew nothing about what I was doing or really how to approach this. Some of the people that did alterations for the store, I got them to sew the samples, and made like 18 shirts, and they sold out in a day. Made some more and they sold out again. So I had proof of concept, an essential part of business.
And we're talking about, this was earlier on, if I remember correctly, this was like early 1970s.
That's right. I was 5 years old. That's right.
So how did you, that there's, like you said, you could draw, but I also read that you didn't really know how to make clothing. And I tried to do that myself. It was very challenging, like cutting the polygons and to actually understand that we are 3D human beings. How did you go from design to making something that actually works, having prototypes, and then to kind of the third stage, which we talk about it today, is something that people actually desire and actually purchased? Like, what was the process like?
I took a shirt that I liked the fit of, one of my shirts. And so I cut it wherever it was stitched and saw the pieces that went together, that puzzle that forms as you said, a three-dimensional piece, because you can draw anything. That doesn't mean that you can actually construct it
Mhm.
or a person can actually put it on. So I sort of taught myself how a garment was constructed. Now, I didn't do the sewing. I had people who did that. And I had people who made actual patterns. But in order for me to design something that could actually be worn, I had to know and educate myself as to, so what's this look like? How do you do that?
Mhm.
So I taught myself. I was completely ignorant, but fortunately not stupid. And so ignorant means you can learn. Stupid's forever. So I was fortunate enough to be a quick learner. That's
Mhm.
about things that I'm interested in. If I'm not interested, I can't understand how to unscrew a jar. But when
Mhm.
I'm interested, I can figure stuff out. And I was really interested in that, and I figured that out. But I was so naive, Faye, that when I was shopping for fabrics and I went to the store and I saw fabric on the bolt, I thought
Mhm.
that was wholesale because it hadn't been made into anything yet. It took me a little bit to realize, no, that's not wholesale. And there are all these offices like in Chicago and New York that sell fabrics wholesale. I had to learn a tremendous amount, but it was also interesting. I met really great people that helped me. I met some not so great people that screwed me,
Mhm.
and you learn who you can trust, who you can't trust. And it was fascinating because the things that I learned in fashion, and this, by the way, this insight didn't come until many, many years later. I realized that the process of designing a line of clothing was the same process as making a movie or a commercial, the same
Mhm.
process as writing a book or a play. It's the same process that whenever you're bringing an idea to market that you have to go through. So I'm also a big believer in whatever you do informs everything else you do if you're paying attention.
Mhm. And it sounds to me that, these days we're living in a digital age, and a lot of people say, hey, buy my program, join my workshop. There is a perfect path from A to B. And having run my own business, very small business since 2016, even before that, I realized that perfect path really doesn't exist. No matter how compelling that marketing message sounds, no matter how much money this entrepreneur made. So I love reading that part of your book, talking to real entrepreneurs, including yourself, to really paint that path. So, what do you think? Is that perseverance? Is it, flexibility? Is it willingness to learn? What do you think is the real secret weapon or formula that informed a lot of your decision making along the way?
Well, there wasn't a secret weapon or formula. I completely agree with you. It's what I call the myth of replication.
Mm-hmm.
If I do exactly what that person did, I will be as successful as that person is. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't work that way. And I don't believe that they're truly beyond best practices, which is show up, be ready, be educated, work hard, perseverance, which is huge. I think the single most thread of continuity through all the people that I've interviewed. So I think that, there isn't a recipe for success that if you do these five things, you are guaranteed success. There's so many variables along the way. And I wanted to mention, by the way, when you mentioned I was one of the top 10 young designers in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, which is true, but it's not quite as impressive as it sounds because I think there were maybe 8 of us young designers. So it wasn't hard to be in the top 10. I don't think there were 10 of us out there.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your early 20s at the time, it was very rare for a young entrepreneur versus today. You got your
Right.
12-year-old, 16-year-olds making millions of dollars. But back then, it was kind of an anomaly. But at the same time, what I love about part of your story was that when you have all these titles, like originally, I believe you went to school in at Wisconsin, Madison. Are you also from Wisconsin? I wasn't sure about that.
No, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, which
Okay.
is a wonderful place to grow up and leave. Uh, and I still go back there. I still
Yeah.
have, I'm fortunate enough to have maintained relationships with many of the people that I grew up with. So
Mhm.
I still enjoy going back there and seeing people, but I knew that that's not where I could become an adult.
That's a yes. I grew up in Beijing, China, which is this huge city, and I noticed like as part of me really craving to be living in the countryside somewhere, which I did in high school, Freiburg, Maine. Immediately after that, I noticed there's an urge of how I've been conditioned and to say I need to be in the city, maybe not as crowded and as vibrant as New York City. I feel like Boston's kind of in the middle of the road, and I really adapted the city quite well early on. There is a pivotal moment that you mentioned, still very early in your career, in your early 20s, but I can see how everybody, possibly family and friends, could be very against that. Is you established yourself in Wisconsin Madison, you had friends there, connections there, and you were known as a fashion designer right there, which is kind of unheard of today, right? Like a famous designer from Wisconsin. Then you went to New York City, uh, and then you were really drawn by place you still live in today. You're drawn by the opportunities. You're not the only one, but then there's that moment of you having to decide to leave everything behind and then move to a city where there's so much more competition. There's nobody, you don't even have a place to live. I cannot imagine the rent to be cheaper in New York City even back then. So what was that process like? Did you how much fear did you carry with you, or were you too young to even realize that?
Well, initially when I started coming to New York, although it was exciting, it was also intimidating.
Mhm.
I wasn't used to mass transit. I wasn't used to the crowds of people on the sidewalk. I wasn't used to an entire place that was like downtown, you know.
Yeah.
And so at first it was intimidating. But the more I went there, I discovered that I'm a stimulus junkie.
Mm.
That as I got more comfortable, because I visited there more and went to plays and went to museums and ate at different restaurants and began to know my way around, I was totally seduced by the stimulating environment that New York was and is and will always be. And
Mm.
so I wanted to be here. I had a terrific financial backer that I attracted because my business was growing so fast. I was doubling like every 3 or 4 months.
Mm.
And I think I was 22 or something, and maybe 23. I had two factories. I had about 110, 120 people working for me, an
Wow.
office in New York, an office in Los Angeles, and then 8 national salespeople. And, the business was growing in spite of me because I was able to design things that people liked and that they wanted. Uh, so coming to New York, I said to my backer, who was a banker, had 5 banks in Wisconsin, and he found me an interesting novelty. And he was a very, very good person who's now no longer with us. And he said, if you move to New York, I'm not going to continue to back your business.
Mm.
You know why I invested. You provide employment for Wisconsinites.
Mm.
And if you move, I don't have a reason to do that. And there was a recession that was going on. I think that was in like 1973.
Mhm.
And I negotiated a separation. Very fair. I have nothing but great things to say about him. You hear things about people who back the business and are cutthroat. This was a really good man. His name
Mhm.
was John Bossard, and he was a very, very good man. And I had to think about it a lot because it was a big deal. I was young and I'm closing a business that got me like national recognition. I was in all the fashion magazines and all that. And friends said to me, so you're going to move to New York? I said, yeah. Do you have a job lined up? No.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you know anybody there? No, not really. No. Do you have a place to live? I said, no. He said, well, aren't you afraid of what's going to happen when you move there? I said, no, I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I don't move.
Mhm.
The script was kind of written, and I needed something different. I needed a different environment to be in.
So you reminded me of some of these kind of common themes I've been hearing on my podcast as well, that the people I tend to interview are creative, but at the same time, they run towards their own fear. I want to kind of hear more about how you process that internally, because what you said reminded me of a conversation I had with the Atherton twins from Cirque du Soleil, of them around the age of 40, a family with 2 kids. Now there are 3 kids in the family, travel around for Cirque du Soleil. And finally, they have this opportunity to be part of the first Paramore, so basically Broadway and Cirque du Soleil collaboration in New York City. And to move the whole family from a house, from a home from in Vegas to New York was just very scary for them. And they did it. They ran towards their fear. And of course, a lot of really great things came out of it. I, I was just wondering, a lot of people are hearing that to say, oh, Jeffrey is so brave. Or like even Faye started her own business as like this Asian immigrant woman. Like, you're so brave. How do you think people should really evaluate their fear? You talked about something last time. There's also in your book, there's kind of that difference between, that processing your own feelings versus really analyzing and understanding the reality of it. So like, how did you line things up, and what was the first few months were like for you?
Well, I guess, what we're really talking about is how do you assess risks,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
that you might want to take. And the way that I kind of looked at it, and I put it together and codified it much more afterwards than before, when I'm going through some of this stuff, that I have some system. No, I didn't. And I was fortunate enough to have parents who were incredibly supportive. They didn't say, no, no, don't move. It's like, they always encouraged me to seek fulfillment and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And they never talked about money, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Now, my grandmother, who was a very wise woman, said it's better to be rich and healthy than poor and sick. but that was about it, And so my parents, I think, were very influential in framing a very secure environment for me to grow up in. So taking that kind of a chance wasn't scary. It truly was more scary to me to not move, because, if I was invited to some situation in Madison because I was in national magazines or whatever, I was courted. But that wasn't interesting to me. What was interesting to me is doing. And, the whole creative process is what was interesting to me. So, when I thought about the move and made that decision, it was really based on the excitement and seduction of what lies ahead, not what I was leaving behind. I was young, single, had enough money saved up that I could sustain for a little while if I lived modestly, which I did. As they say, lived out of a suitcase the first year. I had 11 apartments in 12 months, so I moved around to discover different parts of the city. Wow. And to familiarize myself with it. So I guess, when you're looking back, and I'll suggest this to your listeners, when you look at risk, if you look at it from a 1 to 10, 1 being essentially not risky at all, and 10 being catastrophic, your life is screwed forever if you try that and it fails. Most risks are from 3 to 6. Yeah. They aren't that huge when you gain perspective. And for whatever reason, I was fortunate enough to have perspective, because what's the worst thing that would happen? I'd move to New York. I wouldn't be able to get financing or start another job. And if the absolute worst happened, I moved back. Not that that was ever a thought, by the way, but that's the reality. So when you're sort of listing what are the risk factors involved, it's not like, oh my God, if this doesn't work out, my life is over forever at age 24. That wasn't it. So that removed a lot of the fear and doubt of the risk moving forward, is just thinking about, so what's the worst thing that can happen? In a 1 to 10, maybe it's a 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not that big a deal.
True. And then even I thought, I'm just as lucky that my parents were very supportive when I decided to leave Beijing, China, and to move, to the East Coast of the US. And, I remember my parents were calling me pretty regularly. At first it was like calling cards was very inconvenient, unlike what it is today. But then they always remember to tell me, hey, how is everything going? Remember, you always have a home in China. You can always come home. We welcome you. We won't judge anything. But I was determined. And so were you, very determined in New York City, and you discovered a lot of opportunities. But what's really profound to me is that you did another pivot very drastically to go from fashion to production, video, film production. Could you tell us or give people an idea that you dropped yourself, this young man in the middle of New York City, and these opportunities kind of just rushing towards you, and then you have to kind of pick and choose? And why did you choose a different career path?
Well, let me take it back a bit. It's not like opportunities rush towards me, but I think as an entrepreneur, one of the things that's essential is recognizing opportunities.
Very true.
And so I was able, well, I'll tell you what happened because it's sort of interesting. I had started another clothing company because I ran out of money. I had a good reputation. I was able to attract financing, started another company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to one of the owners of a fabric company that I had bought from in my previous business, another really good person. And he said to me, do you know anything about the film business? I said, I mean, I go to movies, but I don't really know the business. And he goes, well, you got a good head on your shoulders. My son is your age and he's gotten involved with some people. Would you mind talking to him? I said, sure, I'd be happy to. So he said, yeah, maybe he'll listen to you because you're his contemporary and you've got a business. I said, yeah, I'm happy to. So when I met him, he had optioned the rights for a book called Junkie. Junkie was written by William Burroughs. Mm-hmm. William Burroughs was one of the iconic figures of the Beat generation. Mm-hmm. So he wrote Naked Lunch, which was like a seminal work of the 1950s. And he was also the heir to the Burroughs business machine fortune. But he was a total outcast to his family because he was gay, he was a drug addict, and also a tremendously talented writer who had a keen eye for observing the world around him. Dennis Hopper, are you familiar with who he is?
I am not. I did read about them in the introduction.
You know, it's interesting. Dennis Hopper, he was in Rebel Without a Cause, the classic movie with James Dean. He was in Apocalypse Now with Marlon Brando. He was in Blue Velvet. You know, he had quite a career, died a few years ago. And he was going to direct and star in the movie. And when I met with the guy's son, his name is Tommy Erlanger, when I met with him, I got introduced to Dennis, who was staying in his apartment at that time. And Dennis and I really hit it off. I won't go into that story, but it's very funny. And he and I hit it off. And he wanted me to be in the movie. He said, "Smart, you're going to be perfect. You're going to be perfect and it'll be great."
As an actor, like what's your, oh my goodness.
Yeah. But what became eminently clear was that the combination of Burroughs and Hopper and Terry Southern, who was another writer who really sort of captured the 60s in his writing, it was clear that they weren't going to get anything done. So initially it was cool hanging out with these people, and wow, I knew who these people were because I read a lot and I knew who they were. And of course, love film. And so I knew Dennis Hopper's work. I knew Terry Southern's, I knew William Burroughs's work. But what became clear was these guys weren't going to get anything done. It just wasn't happening. Because they had a suite at the Chelsea Hotel, and I would get there at 4 p.m, which is maybe 15 minutes after they woke up, because they had been drinking and binging on substances all night long and not actually getting the work done. And at a certain point, I said to Tommy, you know, you're going to get squeezed out of this. You've put together this team. They don't need you anymore. And he said, but it's my property. I optioned the book. I said, it is, but let's see what happens. I think that's going to happen. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, they offered him money. and the money was 3 times as much as he had paid for the option. So I said to him, take it. And he said, but they're going to then just take the idea and go with it. I said, these guys can't make it out of the hotel room. You think they're going to actually get a movie made? That's not going to happen. So he took the money, which ended up being a good decision for him. It ended my movie career, you know, but during the process, I met other people, and that was my bridge into filmmaking, because I found the potential process really interesting. And that's what formed the bridge out of fashion into filmmaking.
Yeah,
Meeting the right person, recognizing the opportunity, taking the risk to get involved because there was no money involved, and then going for it.
You're absolutely right about recognizing opportunities. And I noticed, especially during the quarantine, during the pandemic, there were even, I think, more opportunities that became really obvious for some reasons. I think because we're all in this together for the first time, we're all sort of have the same type of pain. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter about your race, the color of your skin. And you know, we're all struggling in some sort of ways as entrepreneurs, and some people just kind of surface to the top and to lead in ways they never thought was possible. So previously, I think next I want to just talk about transferable skills, because you had mentioned that as a fashion designer, that there were skills and maybe part of the process and experiences that you're able to transfer over to film production, filmmaking.
Right.
I think some people are gonna at this point will be a little confused, be like, oh, what exactly does he mean? Like, what are some of the things that you can recall that you're able to leverage in film production?
So I'm going to go back to fashion design. All right. First, it's having an idea. And where do the ideas come from? It may come from wardrobe from a movie, something that you see in a magazine, something you see at an art gallery. One of the crucial things, by the way, is keep learning, keep educating yourself, get as much stimulus as possible that can rev up your brain, so that you've got so many references to draw on, that's really, really important. So then after that idea, you have to somehow be able to communicate that idea. So in fashion, it's a sketch. In a film, it's a synopsis, and it might be a storyboard. So it begins to give you an idea of, well, what does this actually look like? I hear your idea. What does it look like? So then you have to think about, what does it take to make that jacket? What does it take to make that film? Well, it takes material, labor, a certain amount of time so you can deliver it by deadline. You have to figure out what all those costs are, so when you deliver it, you're able to get paid for it and make a profit on what you've done. And then you've got to deliver it and follow up after that, because you also have to market yourself. Same thing with the film. So it's all the same kind of process, which comes down to communication, clearly, communicating your idea, aligning and collaborating with the talents that can make it on time, on budget, and then delivering to the buyer on time. And then ultimately with clothing, because I sold to stores, the ultimate consumer has to buy it, which is the retail customer. And the same thing with the films that I did for my clients. The customer and consumer was the audience, which eventually transitioned to an online audience, so they could see who was engaging with it and so on. So they're very much the same in terms of the protocols of business. But that's also true if you're a dentist. You know, it's true of whatever you do. What is it that I do? What does it cost for me to execute that idea? And who do I have to communicate that to? How long is it going to take to get it done? And after all of those calculations, and you know your hard costs, how much can I get paid for this? Is it profitable? Because if it's not profitable, after a while, you can't keep doing it, you know?
I find myself to be someone who's very interested in business since I was little. I kind of started to look back upon like all the games I set up with my little friends. It sounds like you are someone who's also genuinely interested in business, like end to end. So, what's your advice, or have you heard from your very artistic students at Parsons in particular to say, there are people say, I'm not interested in business. I just want to draw. I just want to design. And the crossover on the opposite side of that, like you said, most schools are set up in such a way that you're the creative people sitting over here and you're the business people sitting over here taking your electives. And you are someone who believe that there needs to be some sort of cross pollination, that you really need to learn both. And I would agree with that, because if I simply did what I love doing, recording podcasts, and I never learned production, post-production, editing, then I don't think it will be beneficial to me, especially at the beginning. I try to learn everything on my own. And then later on, find out that, oh, this person is so much better at editing and marketing that maybe I can hire them for it. So how do you kind of change people's mindset or make people more curious, more interested, so that they can be successful in their creative business?
Well, that dichotomy, which I think has done a lot of people harm, because it's another myth about creativity, that, well, if you're creative, you aren't any good at business. And if you're really good at business, you're not creative.
Right.
Well,
right.
entrepreneurs create businesses. So they build something from nothing. It starts with an idea, just like what I said. And I think that there's no question that money is the lifeblood of any business. Would I just like to be able to write, to produce the plays that I'm doing and the other stuff I want to do? Of course, but that's not reality. The reality is that you have to have a cash flow coming in, or investors investing, so that you can bring that idea to fruition. And I think that it is, that's fueled by a myth of left and right brain thinking. Okay, so the idea is that right brain, you're creative, it's spatial relationships, and that's how you think. Oh, I'm a right brain person. And left brain is more methodical and structured and logical. And Roger Sperry, who's a neuropsychologist, won the Nobel Prize in 1991 on split brain studies. But in fact, he was proven wrong a few years later, when brain mapping got much more sophisticated. So as a result, it's still, these days you can go online, you search left, right brain, there's quizzes you can take online, there's hundreds of books about it. It's just not true. If you took the brain and analyzed it of a great artist and an accountant, the brain activity would look the same. There are no discernible differences. Yet that myth pervades to this day. So I know some very creative people go, oh, no, business, no. And business people say, well, I'm not creative, but, and when we were trying to sell this book, we went to a major business publisher, and their response was, well, why would business people want to know about creativity? Then we went to a major publisher who specializes in psychology and self-help and that sort of thing. And they said, well, why would a creative person care about business? And then we went, it's like the Three Bears, right? And then we went to the place that was just right. We went to Hachette, who is my publisher, and they immediately got it. And my editor, Dan Ambrosio, who's great, said, oh, this is great. Nobody's done a book like this before. They're always in separate silos. And I think a book like this needs to be written about how creativity and business actually go together and are not opposing forces. And so I think that mythology allows people to disqualify themselves from certain pursuits when in fact they would be better. And, I think about what was not a very good movie, but fun to watch, which was Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee, loved watching his stuff. It was fun.
Yep.
And in Enter the Dragon, the villain, one of the villains, holds a board right next to Bruce's face. Bruce doesn't blink. The guy pops, breaks the board. Bruce doesn't blink. And then he says, boards don't hit back. And I love that because, yeah, you can have all the technique and process and break the board, but in real life, you get hit back. And when you're an entrepreneur and when you're in business, you get hit back all the time. It's hard. It's easy to start a business. It's harder to build it, even harder to sustain it.
Hmm.
So it's tough. The world hits back. So the
Yeah.
more you know how to protect yourself, if you're a creative, which means having a knowledge of business, it doesn't mean you have to do your own accounting.
Hmm.
But what it does mean is realize also the areas where you are lacking and involve people in that so
Hmm.
that you are protected. And I think that's the main thing is learning how to protect yourself so you can continue doing what you love doing.
Yeah. I think I thanks for explaining that myth because I feel like it is people are blocking themselves based on, these so-called scientific studies that changes every 6 months and to put themselves in a box or in a specific category. And to honestly, I think to create very unhealthy relationships. I remember working in advertising myself as a producer and project manager that regardless of the fact that, my mom's an artist, I paint all the time. I draw on my iPad. It was regardless because of my title, I wasn't really allowed or, asked to be in these creative discussions. And you're seen to be a certain type of personality. So, at the same time, I feel like when it comes to creative work, a lot of people don't realize the fact that what they read on a resume, if they go to your website, my first impression was like, wow, that's of course that you should use these highlight reels. Like the brands that we're talking about are particularly very, Victoria's Secret and Ralph Lauren. Like these are all my favorite designers and brands that are very appealing to the general public. And what people don't see is, oh, Jeffrey probably has gotten lucky. I think we've all have gotten lucky in our careers, but people don't see the fact that there were doors that you knocked on that never opened. The how many times that you fell off your bikes. And so could you maybe talk to us about that? Someone giving your experience. I feel like you lived through so many of them. What is the reality that people don't see that's outside of your highlight reel? Like,
Well,
what
it's called a highlight as opposed to a low light.
yeah.
So that you don't see all the things that either never happened that you hoped would happen
Hmm.
or did happen but got screwed up for one reason or another. There's all kinds of things that happen all the time.
Hmm.
With my son and daughter, when I hear them talking about certain things with the work that they're doing,
Hmm.
it on one hand resonates. And when I'm ready to start as a father pontificating about, well, this is just part of life and you find out for yourself.
Hmm.
Nobody can like warn you against these things. So there are clients that are absolutely wonderful to work with. There are ones that are a total pain in the ass to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you get to the point where you can avoid them, that's great, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's about assessing risk too, because sometimes it's about the money and you need the job. So you need to do something that may not be in that realm of ideal,
Hmm.
but you need it for your business to survive. And you have to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
So I think people that judge harshly haven't been in a situation.
Yeah, whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk to someone like yourself, even though I haven't really experienced as much and my experience is only drawn upon the people I've interacted with. But I gotta say, a lot of people ask me, why do you start podcasting? How much money do you make then? If not, what's the point of it? I think it really opened up my life, my vision, my aperture, like what I had access to. So especially I find and I recommend people talking to people outside of your own race, outside, your own cohort of people, outside of your zip code, different age groups. It's so beneficial because all of a sudden you just have access to so much more information, and all of a sudden you realize your preconception it really are misconceptions to begin with, that you can dip your toes in these areas. It's okay to make mistakes because everybody does.
Right.
Everybody has the same fears. I'm developing a course right now, several courses on my website for podcasters and etc. So, I'm part of a group right now, learning group, and I realized everybody had the fear of dropping the course, nobody's going to take them. Nobody cares. There'll be bad reviews. Everybody feels the same way. But until you do it, you won't even know what it feels like. And you're not alone. You're making progress. That's what progress looks like. So I want to talk about the dozens of people you interviewed as a result of this book. You can draw upon so much personal experience. I mean, I can imagine if I were you, I'd be like, I don't want to talk to anybody anymore. I can just write this book. I have enough stories to share. But yet you went out and talked to dozens of people. What was the thinking process? I mean, that was a lot of work to interview people and compile. Why was it necessary for you to write this book?
Well, first of all, the people that you're talking about are all people, most of them are people that I have had as guests in the class.
Mm.
So the interviews that are contained, or the quotes that are contained in the book, are as if you were sitting in on the class and you heard Eliza Schlesinger talk about comedy. Or you heard Vanessa Friedman talk about fashion from her point of view as being the fashion critic for the New York Times. So all of my guests had points of view that were different than mine, different vantage points and everything else. Teaching is a fantastic way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So having this class that I teach gives me a terrific platform to approach people and to say, I'd love you to do my class. The research that I do on them, so when they show up, I'm actually able to engage them because I'm familiar with their work. I'm familiar with what they've written or the shows they've done,
Mm-hmm.
and show them the respect for giving up their time to come to the class. So first of all, it's not like I interview those people for the book. The book was a byproduct of the interviews.
Lovely.
Okay, so that I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to clarify that. And people wonder, well, how do you get to the people that you get to?
Mm-hmm.
And you find good people through other good people, and you ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will say, oh, you know who you should meet? And others will not help. But, you just keep posing the question.
Yeah.
So I believe you meet good people through other good people. And if they enjoy the experience, they'll help you out.
I mean, a big shout out to Michael Roderick, who introduced us together out of the blue. We originally, I think we had very few common connections, and I, after reading your profile and all that, I was like, okay, I have a good idea. But until I hop on the call, I realized I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've known you my whole life, and it was just so interesting. The first phone call, we ended up chatting close to 2 hours. And if it wasn't for other meetings coming up, other appointments, we would have just kept talking. And that is so powerful because Michael would, at this point, I think he knows really well who would resonate and who I would enjoy speaking with. I think that connection is huge. And for people who are working on creative projects, when you're not by yourself, when you're also creating a platform to share other people's voices, makes you more powerful and makes the marketing process also more authentic because it's not just about you anymore.
Well, that's right. And Michael Roderick is a great example of a generous spirit.
Yeah, he really
that, he's helps people because he helps people.
Mm-hmm,
That's who he is. And he's great. And he comes to my class almost every week. And, he's fantastic.
mm-hmm.
And the thing that I like about Michael is he has one agenda, and that is to help people.
Yeah.
If they reciprocate, fine.
Yeah.
But that's not why he does it. He doesn't do it to build up debt. He does it because he's such a good person, and he's a great connector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's such a good point of view on business, building a business. When you're so genuine with your time, your energy, your willingness to help. I noticed that with my YouTube channel that went from a few hundred subscribers to close to 4,000 today and 110,000 views every month. There are people reaching out to me to say, I need help. What's your rate? I want to hire you to. And I'm thinking, I'm not an audio engineer in particular. That's what those questions are for with Zoom and all that. It's like, maybe you should talk to somebody else. And they're like, no, we want your help, and then when I think video as a result for you to be on Zoom, I'm so excited about, we talked about repurposing your content and all that, but it's just so exciting to be able to see you in action, with your students, with your guests. You just, it's just incredible. So I can't wait to join your class. Please keep me posted.
Well, and we'll now do a shameless plug.
Yeah, please
Uh,
do.
we just launched our website, acreativecareer.com,
Mhm.
and you'll see video clips from the class. And there's also a Instagram site at a creative career.
Mhm.
And there you will also see clips from the class. And that's been going on a lot longer. So there's a lot more stuff to look at, although they're shorter quotes because of Instagram's length.
Mhm.
And you can also go to madoffproductions.com and you can see my video work. So you can see those different things and get an idea of them. And I just started a group last week on LinkedIn called Creative Careers. And it's exactly what we're talking about. It's a place for creative idea exchange. And
Unbelievable.
so I think that'll be really cool too.
Absolutely. And I actually have included, I forgot to mention at the beginning of this call that I included a bunch of the links, including Madoff Productions. But I'm going to add to that a list of, creativecareers.com as well, in case people want to watch this after we finish talking, and then they can access those links as well.
Great. And it's
Yeah,
acreativecareer.com.
acreativecareer.com. Okay.
I wish it could have been Creative Careers, but the
Yeah.
domains were all taken.
I know, I know. And those are really popular. Yeah, I even looked up like hashtags and everything. Those are really popular. But yeah, this is wonderful. There's one thing I noted. I know it's been a long time since I kept you on this call, but one thing that really resonated with me, given both of us have been doing martial arts, and you were a wrestler, you love watching martial art movies. You said something called think in series. I
Yes.
just love that. I love the fact that I was even kind of reflecting on that yesterday, of thinking, why do some people not just succeed, but to stick to a plan, to be actually productive? It is, people these days talk about accountability. It's a concept that I go, all right, I get it, but it's like, I oftentimes I don't feel like I need accountability. I think because of martial arts, to say, in order to get to C, you got to hit A, and B, you can just visualize it, like certain kicks and movements. Like you can't do a full wheel kick, turn around. You got to do face forward, do a little hook kick first. Then you build up the muscle. So you just kind of see it and you can visualize it. Like, do you want to say a few things about Think in Series? I that should be your next book, please.
Well, first of all, with wheel kicks and hook kicks, you could kick my ass. So, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Now I'm going to be very careful. uh, well, it's like chess playing. My
Mhm.
son was a very, very good chess player and played competitively.
Wow.
And, it's thinking in series because you've got to think in chess a few moves ahead.
Mhm.
I am no chess expert, but I know that that's the common knowledge among great chess players. In wrestling, what it means is that if you're doing a move, that move meets resistance, then you quickly pivot to another move.
Mhm.
You don't want to exhaust yourself. The idea is to exhaust your opponent.
Mhm.
So, it's just thinking ahead of what could go wrong and having a plan that if that goes wrong, you do something else or something else.
Mhm.
When you're in production, film production, the lighting changes. What are you going to do? We're shooting outside and we don't have another day to shoot. So what are we going to do? And there's always so much of creativity is problem solving.
So true.
That's a huge part of it.
Mhm.
So on those days where it seems like, oh man, nothing is going right,
Mhm.
the best you can do is be really planned out. And
Yeah.
you do that. That phase is called pre-production, which is true when you're writing a book. It's true when you're starting a business.
Mhm.
It's the training that you do before you do a martial arts contest.
Yeah.
It's pre-production so that you do have a plan, but
Mhm.
you may have to iterate and pivot from that plan. And
Mhm.
that's the thinking in series.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, that's been so great, Jeffrey. I so appreciate your time. And I included link as well to your book. People can learn more about you, your production company. I will soon include a creativecareer.com in the description. It's just been such a pleasure knowing you. And I can already see so many opportunities for collaborations with you and the super fun projects you're working on. I don't know how it goes, but you're so low key about the people you know, the projects you worked on, because I've spoken with casually with a lot of people who are just, name drops and all that. You've never done that. We have to kind of dig those out on our own. Yeah, I mean, how do you, my last question, how do you stay so level headed and, not to make a big deal out of yourself? How does that work?
Uh, I think there are people, including my wife, that if you said, "How do you stay so level-headed?" she would say, "Clearly, you don't know him." you know, uh, I think that I don't even know how to answer the question. It's just kind of a way of being, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a calculation. Uh, I know that if somebody, and I've been around them, relentlessly drops names, I find it off-putting.
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't want to do what I consider to be off-putting. Uh, but honestly, it's nothing that I think about. It's
Mm-hmm.
just this happens to be how I am,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for better or for worse. And certainly sometimes it's for worse, but it just happens to be who I am. But I do think that an important note to leave your audience with is the key in all businesses
Mm-hmm.
and life is the quality of the relationships that you establish and sustain.
Mm-hmm.
That can take you through good times. You have the people to celebrate with, and bad times, you have the people that support you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important. And the importance of building relationships is something that a lot of people don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's critical to do that. So, if I can educate and inform and inspire and entertain through my class or through the book or something like that, then I'm putting something out there in the world that I think is positive.
Yeah,
How that ends up being received, I have no control over.
that's true. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I'm just gonna show off my uh iPad book cover one more time. I really like how this is designed. Love the big bright orange, and that doesn't, it's easy to find this book cover. I feel like there's a lot of blue and just everything else, so I love
Well, one,
this.
one more thing then. My
Yeah.
daughter designed that. She's a very, very talented graphic designer.
Oh my
So,
God. I can't wait to meet your kids. I feel like I feel like I really like to hang out with them too. So I would love that.
well,
Um,
I mean, I'm thrilled to be able to say that. I think that's really cool that my daughter did that. That she's that talented. It's really neat.
yeah, very, very professional. And I love the fact that for you, I mean, for people to know that, it's important that when they pick up the book, it's like, I feel like that really the family is involved, your connection, your relationship, these dozens of influencers and teachers, and your kids are involved. You just mentioned your son's story, and that is so much more powerful as a unit, in my opinion.
We are sometimes a unit, and sometimes not. My son will look at the stuff that I'm trying to do online. He goes, "Dad, do you have any idea what you're doing?" Because that's how he makes his living, is actually web design and SEO and
Wow.
growth hacking and
Yeah.
marketing. And so it's,
Yeah.
"Dad, do you have a clue to what you're doing?" Shut up. But it's interesting because you start off sort of teaching your kids,
Hmm. And
and
then,
then as they get older, they start teaching you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned my project to you as well with my mom, paintings behind me. And last time when I talked to you, I didn't have the dress, but now my mom's painting is the dress I'm wearing now. I have
Oh,
to.
let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I looked at your mom's website, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful work. Really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I am doing even more, and I hired an apprentice, Anna, who's going to help me out. I'm just so excited. And yesterday, I got to confess, I spoke with a friend of mine, Amber, who gave me really critical feedback. And I was thinking about you too, where she said, "Oh, this type of dress isn't really going to be it. Some women gonna love it. Some women won't want to wear it." My mom does a lot of figure painting, as you see. So when I have like her full silhouette and the figure with the woman's like head on your shirt, like that wouldn't really work for every body type. So think about scarves, shirts, loose fit, and so it was just so fascinating. It's such a humbling experience for me to work as a fashion designer. So it's been
Well,
fantastic.
well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks for what you're doing. I can't wait to just continue reading through the book and maybe quoting you in some of, definitely love using quotes. I'm going to get some sound bites from this interview as well. So thank you so much for being on this. I really